ఇక్కడ మళ్ళీ క్లాస్ 2 అని బెస్ట్గా ఓపెన్ ఉంటుంది. అది మనం డిలీట్ చేస్తాం.
Hello all. Today's topic is control structures. These control structures are very much needed to control the instructions and execution process. Let's say from one instruction to the next instruction, how your code flow should proceed. The compiler will execute simultaneously one by one blindly. So we as a coder should understand where to divert or route the compiler for our application. So these all the statements which are there present inside in front of this slide, these are very useful to route the control to the respective needs. The first one is if else, next is for loop, while loop, break and continue, switch case, and go to. These are the control structures, and we will see how to use one by one with an example, sample code. First one is if else statement. If else statement is nothing but if you are having two conditions or more than two conditions, then if you want to evaluate the particular condition with an expression, then we should use if else statement. As the name said, if the first condition is executed, that means the conditional expression is true, then the compiler, the code part will go into the body of the if condition. If that is not executed and the statement of that expression is evaluated to false, then the statements inside the body of else will be executed. If both if condition and else condition cannot execute at the same time, either if can execute the conditions present inside the body of if, or the conditions present inside the else will get executed. Both cannot execute it at the same time. So if you see this example, right, the left part of it is the true expression, right part of it is a false expression. Let's say I have created a variable data type integer assigned to a value 5. So if I'm writing an expression stating that if my variable test is less than 10, then if this condition is true, this expression condition is true, then the control will go inside the body of if and execute the statements inside the if. And else part won't get executed as the control is satisfying the if condition, then else part condition won't get executed if the expression is true. Same will applicable for expression is false. If test is equal to 5, the data type of this variable test is integer. If that is equal to 5, and the same 5 greater than 10, which is false, right? So this expression itself is false. So if part won't go inside, if part will go inside only if it is true. So it comes to the else part. That means whatever the expression, if that is not true, then immediately it will jump to else part. Then it will go inside the body of the else part and gets executed with the instruction. One example code is in C code basically. Slash include stdio.h is an header file. In that main function, the function data type is integer. That means it will return a integer value. So I have taken a variable which is number and asking a user to enter a integer using a printf statement. Then once he has entered it, I have to scan the variable, whatever the value it has. So I'm using scanf function. %d represent the integer of the particular variable. As I am expecting an integer from the input from user, so I use %d over here. And if the number, whatever entered by the user, is divisible by 2. So percentage is the modulo division, right? So the remainder of this number, if it is 0, then I am printing it as an integer, even integer. If it is not 0, let's say he has entered 3, then the remainder is not 0, right? It will be 1. So it will come to second loop, printf, the entered number, whatever the number by the user, is an odd number. 3 is an odd number. So example output is I have entered 7. 7 is an odd number integer. Right? Next one is a for loop. For loop, the basic use of for loop is for the initialization statement executed only once. Whatever the initialization you have done, that will be executed only once. After that, it will evaluate one test expression. It will iterate the loop till the test expression is false. So once for the first time it iterates, and if the test expression is true, then it will go inside the for loop and execute the instructions inside the body of the for loop. After that, at the end of the for loop, we have to update the iterator. Once the iterator is updated, the next way, it will again with the new value, the expression gets evaluated If it is true again it will goes to the body of the for loop and get executed till it gets false. Once it gets false, the expression gets false, then it comes out of the for loop. This process goes until the text expression is false. Only when you want to end this for loop execution, you have to make the expression false. That is the only way to stop the for loop. Example to it is, I'm printing a numbers from 1 to 10. So I know my starting point, I know my ending point. Very important thing to remember is for loop. If you are aware of what is the starting point, what is the ending point, you have to use for loop. Many people will get confused with for loop and while loop. When to use for loop, when to use while loop. If you know starting point, if you know ending point, then you have to use for loop. If you don't know the starting point or ending point as well, then you have to iterate with while loop. Okay. So here, what I have to do, again, I have to write my code inside the main function. I take a variable I integer and using a for loop for I is equal to 1, I less than 11 plus I am doing here pre-increment. What will happen here is, why I am doing a pre-increment? I can do the post increment, right? Why I am doing a pre-increment? The reason is, once the loop gets executed, then the variable gets incremented at the end of the loop. For that purpose, I am using pre-increment. If I use I plus plus, what will happen? If I use I plus plus, 1 won't get printed. Before going inside the loop itself, it gets incremented. Then it will come as 2 to 10. Okay. But my question is, I have to print from 1 to 10. So that is the reason I have used pre-increment. Once it gets the condition here, assignment is once only. So for every iteration, you have to assign to 1. Then it gets incremented from 1 and check the expression, evaluates the expression. 1 less than 11 is a true. Expression is holds true, right? Then it goes to inside print function, print the value. After that, it increment, then it goes to the second one, and so on till 10. Next is while loop. While loop evaluates the text expression inside the parenthesis. Only one parenthesis will be there. Only in that expression will be there. If the text expression is true, then it will go inside the while loop and evaluate it. If it is false, then it will go outside the process. When the text expression gets ended, the loop iteration gets ended is the text expression, same like for loop. If it gets false, then only it will terminate. And while loop is very careful, you have to use very careful. If you use while loop in parenthesis 1, then it will execute the loop infinite times. There is no stop, because in parenthesis, if you write 1, 1 is always true, right? That is the reason there is no stop for this particular thing. If you want to execute in an infinite loop situation, you have to use 1 inside a while loop. Let's see an example. So initialization and all you have to do outside in while loop. Whereas in for loop, you can do in the same way. So I have printed 1 to 5. So for the first time, I initialization, the data variable is I, and data type of it is integer. So is equal to 1. While of it executed less than or equal to 5. That means till it reaches the condition, till it reaches to 5, it gets executed. After that, it comes out of the while loop. So that is the reason you will get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's a pre-increment. So you will get executed. Next is do while. The body of do while loop is executed once. But after that only the text expression get executes on. If the text expression is true, then the body of the loop is executed again, and the text expression also gets executed again. So it's a iterative approach between text expression and do while. It's very simple. Do while means do this first, then it goes to the text expression. Check there first. If it is true, then only go and check the second expression. It's like that. Okay. This process goes on until this test expression is false. If the test expression is false, then it will automatically ends. For example, if we are writing a program here to add a numbers until user enters 0. That means user enters n number of numbers. There is no limit for the user. If user enters 0, then the text expression gets evaluated as false and it will come out of the loop. So let's see how it goes. The fun is I've used a double. Why is a double? The reason is user can enter any number, right? He can enter any number also. That is the reason I have taken 8 bytes to the memory location using double data type. Sum is equal to 0. Do this statement first, then execute the expression evaluated over here. So I am taking the number, assigning that number to the sum, adding to the sum. And while till when I have to take? Till user enters into 0. So I have to print the sum. So once you execute this program, the first part of it is do. So it will do this instruction, ask a number from the user. Once it gets the number from the user, takes the number, then it sum it up, then it goes to the second loop and it prints. As the number is 1.5, it is not 0, so it execute and ask for the second time. And it will take the second number. Like that, it takes all the numbers. At the end of the fourth iteration, after the fourth iteration, user is giving 0. That means till the numbers, whatever it is taken, it is taken. At the end, once the user gives 0, do instruction will have a print sum. The sum gets executed and it will print 4.7. As expression is evaluated to the false, so it will break and come out of the loop. Next is break. Break statement will forcefully end the loop immediately. Even though text expression is true, if you want force exit from the loop, then you have to use a break statement. The pseudocode for that is while text expression, and if you have a condition inside it, and keep, if it meets the condition, then you break the code. This break can be used in while loop, do while loop, and for loop as well. So one such example is I have taken a variable I and the double number and sum is 0. I am iterating using for loop from I is equal to 1 till 10, as it has less than or equal to, right? So till 10 it will execute. So I am asking to enter a number from the user. Once he enters the number, I will take that number and I will check the number. If the number is less than 0, that means if the user enters a negative number, then I'm asking to break the loop forcefully. If he is not entering a negative number, then it won't satisfies or goes inside this if loop, right? Then it come out of the if loop and it goes to adding a sum to the number whatever entered it. As I have declared initialized sum as 0, so whatever number he is entering, it gets added up automatically. Plus is equal to is nothing but sum is equal to sum plus number. It's just adding. I have written in the comment part. Okay. So once you run it, let's see what happens in the output. The first one, N1 is 2.4, next N2 is 4.5, N3 is 3.4, and 4 is -3. So first, for the first 3, it gets added up, and the fourth, when it sees fourth number, it ends the loop. Now here one question will arise for everyone. So whether the fourth number also gets taken up and sum is getting calculated or not? No, it won't. The reason is it enters inside the if loop as the condition gets satisfied, and immediately there is something called break. That break means it will come out of this main function. That means the instructions next to break statement won't get executed, either this or this or this. It just force exit from this entire loop. Okay. Next one is, as we see break, right, there is another one which is called continue. Continue statement skips the current iteration of the loop and continue with the next iteration. What it is, let's say you have a test expression and it is used in while loop, for loop, and do while loop also. You have a text expression. If the text expression is validated, let's say in the previous example itself, user entered a negative number. There we have used break. Our question is, when it enters a negative number, you have to, break the loop. Now the same another question. If he enters a negative number, you just keep on counting how many times he has entered the negative number and continue. Do your execution. So at that purpose of time, instead of break, you have to use continue option. Okay. One such an example is program to calculate the sum of 10 numbers maximum. If the user enters a negative number, it's not added to the result. Okay. Have taken a number and a sum. I used a for loop where to iterate from 1 to 10. I'm taking input from the user using printf and taking the value whatever he has entered to the scanf. If that number is negative number, that means number less than 0. User has a privilege to enter a float number also. That is the reason I have kept here 0.0, right? So if he enters a negative number, I am using here continue statement instead of break. The reason is I should not add to the result. I should not force exit the loop. I should continue doing this loop for 10 times, whatever it is happen. Right? That is the reason over here. Next is switch statement. Switch statement allows us to execute one code after the other. How many times it has, how many alternatives it has. Let's say it has 100 alternatives. Till these 100 alternatives are get checked, it won't execute. This expression is evaluated once and compare the value at the each case. If there is a match, corresponding statement, if there is a match value is found. After that match value is found, it won't check for the another one. If there is no match value, then we have to tell in the default statement what has to be done to the statement. That has to be there and that gets executed. So let's say you are having 4 conditions. All these conditions are kept. All these alternatives are not satisfied. You have to provide the final default alternative. So the default alternative is like optional value to the user. So example code for that the same is, I use a program for simple calculator. For any calculator, you need 2 numbers. So I am taking double n1 and n2. So why it is double? I have to use a big number. If user enters a very big number, still it should hold. Good. Right. Next one is character. Character I am considering as an operator, another variable. User has to enter. I will have to ask what operation I have to perform, right? For that purpose, he has to use special characters in the string. So I'm considering it as a character. So printf enter the operator I am using, asking the user to enter the operator. After that, I am scanning whatever the operator is entered. and stored in C. Operator variable. After that, I'm asking you to enter, user to enter two variable values. So value 1, value 2. Now, here I am providing a cases wherein which whatever the operator is asked, user has operated. Let's say user has entered plus. Then what will happen? So it should add both of it and it should show the answer, print the answer. If it is plus, then addition will happen. If it is minus, subtraction will happen. If it is multiplication star, then multiplication will happen. Slash modulo division will happen. Let's say apart from these three options, if he entered anything like parentheses, bracket, flower brackets, and something, then in calculator we cannot consider that as an operator and perform the application, right? Calculation. So for that purpose, we use here a default option. That is called default option, where in which we can execute what it shows. Here we cannot perform the calculation, right? So that is how we raise an exception using an error and operator is not correct. Next is go to statement. Go to statement allows us to transfer the control from one label to another label. Like you are in line number 10. If you want to jump from line number 10 to 30, then directly you can use this go to statement. Example of it is program to calculate sum and average of positive numbers. If the user enters a negative number, then sum and average are displayed. Very simple. So maximum input I am taking in variable const variable. That means this maximum input variable value won't get changed. It's a constant variable. Entire program it is same. It won't change. Now another variable number average and sum assigned value to 0. Now use a for loop I is equal to 1 asking user to enter a number. Taking a number, then if number less than 0, that means if a number entered by the user is negative, then I have does here something called go to jump. Here I am using a go to using with a label that is called label declaration. Go to jump is a label declaration. Now compiler, instead of going to the next instruction, sum plus is equal to number, it jumps directly associated label of jump instead of executing the next instruction. So the next one is under jump, we are doing something called whatever the instruction is there that gets executed, right? So when and where this type is needed, this type is needed wherever you are having an exceptional case to handle. Exceptional case is nothing but you are wrote a code which is intended to work, but you have to think the error provocation states as well for that particular piece of code. So in that scenarios, you have to use this go to label concept. Using this go to label concept, it is best practice to use this go to label concept when you are dealing with unknown scenarios. You don't know when and where your code gets executed. Let's say user is giving some n number of numbers with infinite value. At that point of time, your memory cannot store that particular value. This is a very good example, or division by 0, reminder by 0, or label by 0. This type of situation also can occur during a code execution. This type of things can be encountered or handled using these labels. Go to label. Classic example. So moving to the next concept, functions and arrays. So let's start with functions. A function, what is a function and what are the different types of functions present in C? The function is nothing but a block of code that performs a specified task. If you have a repetitive task to be performed every time, for 100 times. You don't need to write those 4 or 5 lines of code that specify the task code lines for 100 times sequentially. You can write a function and iterate using a for loop of that function 100 times. Indirectly, it executes the 100 instructions present inside that function. This is a classic usage of function. In C programming, we are having two types of functions. One is standard library function. Next one is user-defined function. What is meant by standard library function? Standard library functions are built-in functions in the C. So these function definitions are present already in the header files. Example, I have used previously stdio.h header file for using a inbuilt function called printf and scanf. Printf is a standard library function defined in this standard io.h. So that is the reason I have used this in include function. Next, another function is square root. Sqrt is a function. What it does is it will calculate the square root of a given number. Where it will be present? It will be present in math.h header function file. So how a person new to C language will understand or he knows it? What are the inbuilt standard function directories? Right? So these are already listed in standard library function toolkit that is present in your installation directory. So you just have to go there and check the readme file of the standard directory and you'll get to know it. Okay. Apart from this, it is not like all the scenarios, all the functions are present to handle that scenarios. No, there are some functions that cannot be present in inbuilt directory. Those situations, C allows you to create your own functions. That is called user-defined functions. User can create a function as per his requirement, need, whatever it is. Such type of functions are called as user-defined functions. Most of the companies, right, user-defined functions only will be created. Inbuilt functions will be used very minimal. So you have to know how to create a function and use it across in diversified nature. For that, we will see now how to define a function. You should know how to write a function, right? It doesn't mean that a header file, all the functions are available in this universe are present in header files. No, you also have to create a header file for writing the function. Let's see one example how function gets created or defined. Function always begins from the function name. And before that, a C program gets executed from main function only. A main itself is a function. When the compiler encounters any function name, the control will go inside the function. Then compiler start executing one by one the instruction present inside that function. Once that is done, then it will go back to main function again. And these function names should be unique. If you are not following uniqueness in the function name or not following the standards, if you are using the same function name across every time, then you will get an error called function overloading. We'll see that also in upcoming slides. So it is mandatory to use unique function names across the coding. User-defined functions are very easier to understand and maintain as well. These reusable codes, whatever you are going to write, can be used in another functions as well, another files as well. Very simple. What you have to do is whatever function you have written, that function name you have to include during inclusion of the new file. Next one is function prototype. A function prototype is a simple declaration of a function that specifies the function name and whatever the arguments that are present are needed to be taken inside the function. So if nothing is there, then it doesn't mean that it doesn't contain any function body. A function prototype given information to the compiler how this function will behave. Let's take one example, right side of the slide. You have a function prototype considering the function called int add numbers, int a comma int b as an arguments. So you are passing two variables with data types integers, and the function name is add numbers, and the data type of the function is integer. The definition of that function is defined at the end. Wherever you can define, no problem. Because compiler will blindly execute only the main function. It will start executing from the main function. So it goes into the main function and reads the two numbers. Then here our function we have called inside the main function. Then once the compiler hits this instruction, then it will check the definition of this function and jumps to the definition of the function. This is nothing but add numbers. So it will check for the definition. So it is defined in inclusion list. So this function is already present. So it will jump from here to here and executes all the instructions present inside and return. Here we have given something called return the result. Once it's executed, the result will be assigned to the variable sum. So this is how the function works. So the sum value will be assigned and it gets printed over here once it gets converted. Next, calling of a function. How to call a function? Control of the program is transferred from one to another. Let's say you have user-defined functions. Control will be go from main function to the user-defined function and come back to the same. Let's say you are having a function called you made add numbers n1 comma n2 inside a main function. Then what will happen? The function, once the compiler hits this particular line, the function call will happen and the control will go from here to here and then execute this instruction and return back the variable value. Next is passing argument. Passing argument to a function. So how to use different types of things over a same function? Argument is nothing but in any programming language, argument refers to the variable that you are passing to the function. If your function needs a dynamic data, then how you will declare a dynamic data? How you will use the dynamic data? This with help of arguments. The above example also we have seen two numbers n1 and n2. These are not the static numbers, right? These are not the same numbers like 1 or 2. It is defined dynamically and it is assigned based on the user input. User can assign any number, right? That is the reason. These numbers are dynamic. So these arguments are explicitly used inside the function. The the things which are present inside these brackets are called arguments. You have to define the type of data type of that argument, and it is not mandatory as well. Like you can write a comma b also. You can write int a comma int b. If you are not writing integer, just writing a, then compiler won't understand what type of number gets transferred or need to be transferred from this function call. So the parameters a and b accepts the passed arguments in the function definition. These arguments are called as formal parameters. These type of arguments that are passed to a function and the formal parameters must match. Let's say I have used one value over here and I have used two values over here. Then it won't match, right? I have to initially the function declaration, I am using only two variables. If I pass three variables to it, it won't consider. The compiler will throw an error. Next is a return statement. Return statement terminates the execution of the function and returns the value to the called function. So let's say here I have called a function, and once it executed, at the end it is returning the value result variable. So this result variable will get assigned to the sum variable. The program control is transferred from one to another using this function call and to the return value. Above example, right? We have seen the value of a result variable returned to the main function directly and assigned to the sum variable present inside the main function. This type of return is happened from one function to another function also. And these return type variable, right? This to be specified in the function prototype directly. Like if you are returning an integer variable, then integer value, then the function type should be, data type should be integer. If you are mentioning here integer and you are returning a string or character, then it is not correct. So it will throw error. Compiler will throw an error. Now coming to the user defined types functions. So we are having 4 different types of user defined function. First one is no argument passed and no return value. That means inside the function, there is no argument defined and there is no return value also. If that function is called, it will do some calculations or some instructions inside the function and just completes it. That is one type. Next one, no argument passed and return value. So there is no need of any arguments, but once the instructions gets executed, it returns some value to the called function. That is another type. Second type is arguments are needed. Arguments are passed, but no return value. Arguments are passed with a return value. These are the 4 different types of functions, user-defined functions. The next one is recursion. Very, very important topic in C. Not only in C, in any programming like C++, Java, Python, any programming language, recursion is a commonly used technique. What is meant by recursion? Very simple. Function that calls itself is known as recursive function. And this technique is called recursion. The recursion continues until some condition is met. Otherwise, it will continue and keep on executing the same function again and again and again. If you want to prevent this infinite recursion, you have to use always a conditional expression or a condition to break this recursion. If you are not giving a condition based recursion approach, then you are writing a bad way of writing a program. So recursion will need always a expression based condition approach. Example, let's take an example here to understand what is a recursion means. So here in this program, what I am doing is I have declared one user defined function sum and asking an argument integer n. In the main function, I have taken two another variables integers number comma result. Asking user to enter the number, taking the number and storing in number value. Now calling the function sum of the number. Once the function call is made, then it jumps to here. Control will go to this function call and enters inside the arguments. Enters inside the arguments. Now in this here, what will happen is n not equal to 0. That means whatever the value that is passed in the argument is not equal to 0. Then return n plus n minus 1. What is meant by that? Whatever value you have entered, let's say 1 you have entered. Then what will happen? Return 1 plus, again the same function gets called in the condition. This is the condition. N minus 1 is the condition. Now what will happen is till this n minus 1 means the condition of decrement here 1 minus 1 is 0. The condition is 1 not equal to 0, which is 0 is not equal to 0. That means 0 equal to 0, right? Condition is satisfied. If that condition is satisfied, it will come. If the condition is not satisfied, then this recursion gets breakdown here and it will go to the else part. So the classic example here is I have given a number 3. Then what will happen? This function will make a function call with an argument 3. Then it goes inside. Then what will happen? It will check the condition. 3 not equal to 0. Agreed. It will go inside the condition. Then what will happen? It will execute this return n plus sum of n minus 1, which is 3 plus sum of 3 minus 1 is 2. Then sum of 2 gets called. Sum of 2 is another same function, right? The same function will go from the top again and execute this and add to this reminder. So here 3 plus 2, again 1, again 0. Like this all gets executed with 4 times. At the end it returns the value. This is how recursion works. Next topic is storage class. Storage class is very important. Why it is needed is whatever variable you have considered in C, it will have two properties. Either what is the type of it, data type of it, and what is the storage class associated to that variable. Type is nothing but a data type. Storage can be defined based on the scope and visibility of that particular variable entire program. So this storage class is must needed. And what are the types associated in C? There are 4 types associated in the storage class. One is automatic, external, register, and static. We'll see what it is. First one, automatic. This is also called as local variable. The variable declared inside a block is automatically considered as local variable. Let's say you have a value n1 and n2 variables which are present inside the main function, inside the function call. You cannot use the value associated to the variable n2 in main function because it is an associated local variable present inside the function. Only the instructions under the function can only use it. Okay, this means you cannot access the n1 or n2 variables either of the functions. The scope of this function local variable is defined in the function call. Next is external global variable. These external variables are also known as global variables. So the keyword of it is extern. Extern, you have to specifically keep the keyword before the data type of the variable. Then that means that this is the global variable. These variables are defined outside the functions. As it is defined outside the functions, you can use this variable value, associated variable, throughout the function executed and across the functions as well. These variable values are global variables, can be modified in the functions as well. One function can modify and change to the another function as well. So the keyword to use here is extern. What is the scope? They are not bound to any function. It can present or used anywhere in the program. That is called global. What is the default value assigned to it? Whatever the assignment given inside initially, that is the default value. Coming to the lifetime is till the end of the program. You can use this variable anywhere. And we should be careful while using the global variables. Example, user ID password. Let's say you are building a user ID password protected system. Username can be used as a global variable, but password is not used as a global variable. It is not recommended to use a global variable for the password because password is a user sensitive information. Classic example. Next one is register variable. Register variable tells the compiler to store the variable in CPU register instead of memory. Whenever you consider a variable value assigning to the data, that will first directly go and sits inside the memory, not inside the register. So if you want explicitly store in the register, then you have to use a keyword called register in front of the variable. This register variable will be used. We can never get the address of these variables because it is stored in the registers, right? You cannot get the address of this variable. Why we need this type of variables in the first place? The reason is, if you want a faster execution during your program, you have to use register value. That doesn't mean that you have 1,000 variables in your application. You cannot keep all the 1,000 variables as register. You want faster execution. That is wrong again. So registers are very limited and minimal. So you have to use wisely, and you cannot use all the values at a time. The scope of this is local to the function, obviously. That why? Because if it is local to the function, then it executes faster. Default values are always initialized with garbage value. The lifetime of it is till end of the code block only, wherever it is defined. Once it is outside, then it won't. The example of it is the main function. We have kept registered character x is equal to s, assigned with s. Another variable integer a is equal to 10, and it's a register. So these two values x and a, associated variable values, gets stored in registers. Now auto int is b is equal to 8. Then we are printing them and perform the operation. Next is static variable. Static variables are initialized only once. This compiler persists with the variable till the end of the program. The static variables can be defined inside or outside. These are local to the code block, and default values are stored in the static variables. These static variables are live till the execution of the program. Once the program gets executed, the staticness will go away. Next topic is arrays. There are three different types of arrays. First, we will see the programming, how to program an array, and dimensionality introduced in array, multidimensional arrays, using multidimensional arrays, and how these arrays are used in the functions. Start with programming an array. An array is a variable that gets stored multiple values. The syntax for this is the data type and the name of an array, and you have to specify size of an array. Example, int data in square bracket, you have to keep 5. Array has to be kept followed with a square bracket, not a parenthesis. If it is a function, then parenthesis. If it is an array, then it's a square bracket. It's important to note that size and type of an array cannot be changed once it is declared. You cannot change. To access an array elements, what you have to access? So it starts with 0 indentation. So 0, let's say you are defining with a size of 5. That means the number associated to the array is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. The starting number associated type is 0. Next is 1, next is 2, next is 3. At the end, it is 4. That means if you define the size of an array is n, to access the last element, then the size, the number associated to that is n minus 1 index. That is the index number. Suppose the starting address of a mark 0 is 2120. Then what is the address of mark 1? As this is an integer array, then 4 bytes gets allocated to the mark 0. The next starting address of mark 1 starts with 2124. Similarly, mark 2 is 2124 plus 4, which is 2128, and so on. Because the size of an integer is 4 bytes, as we discussed yesterday. Never access elements outside the range of array. You will get an error outside and range out of index. How to initialize an array? If you are having predefined values, how to initialize it? Very simple. The data type of array and its size, and you have to keep them in a flower bracket and keep the values associated to it. If it's an integer array, all the numbers separated by comma. If it is a string, all the nums in double quotes. If it is a character, all the literals in a single quote. If you are not keeping the size of an array, it automatically calculates the numbers present in the array and it considers the same size. If you don't know what is the specified size, then your compiler will automatically calculate the based on the initialized elements and stores corresponding element in the corresponding position of index. Let's say int mark, and you are not keeping the size of an array and keeping the numbers 19, 10, 8, 17, and 9. Then the compiler will keep an associated values to the index 0 to 19, 10, 8, 17, and 9, and so on. How you can change the value of an array elements? It is very simple. First of all, which index you want to change? Consider that index. In this example, I want to change the third element. So third element index value is 2. It is starts with 0, right? That is the reason 0, 1, 2. 0, 1, 2. So this is the third element. So index is 2. That is the reason I have taken. So in the array index number, and you can directly assign value to it. This is how the third element gets changed. Next, the same way you can change the fifth element as well. Now, how you can input and output an array? That means how you can take a values from the user and store them in the array and print in the terminal to show the user whatever he has entered. Sample program for it. Main function, declare an array, integer array with variable name values. Size of it is 5. Now I iterate using for loop. Starting position, it's an variable integer, it's 0, and we want to take 5 values. As array starts from 0 to n-1, which is 4, I don't want to take 5. That is why I'm not giving here less than or equal to, I just give less than. So and pre-increment. So scanf percentage d ampersand values I, the address of it. So once the user enters the value 5 integers one by one, the values will be taken and stored in this value. Once that is done, I iterate for loop again to display the integers one by one using for loop. Again the same type. Instead of scanf, I use the printf to print it. Next is multidimensional array. In this multidimensional array, you will have a privilege of taking multidimensional array. Most of the complex problems needs a multidimensional array. How we can create this multidimensional array? Yes, it is possible in C. We can create array of arrays. Multidimensional array is also nothing but array of arrays. So let's take X here, an array. It's a 2-dimensional array. Now it can hold 12 elements. How? If you declare in this pattern of size 3 and 4, that means rows and columns. This is nothing but rows and columns. 3 rows and then 4 columns. This is like matrix, rows by columns. I have represented the positions over here, rows by columns. If you want to see, right, the first element is nothing but 0 row and 0 column. Second element is nothing but 1 row and 0 column. Indexes also starts from 0. If you want to change fifth element, then how to change it? So the first element is this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you want to change fifth element, then you have to keep x of 1 of 0 is equal to 4. Like that you can change. You can declare n-dimensional array also. These total numbers that can be stored in multi-dimensional arrays. You can calculate the size based on multiplication of the size of the array. Let's say you are having int x array variable and size as 10 and 20. So row is 10, column is 20. So size of element is how many elements it can store in that array is very simple. Row multiplication with column. 10 into 20 is 200. 200 elements you can store in that particular array. So how you will assign, initialize the two-dimensional array? Simple examples is, these are the three different ways you can initialize the two-dimensional array. You can keep the sizes 2 by 3, which is 6 elements can be part of it. Either you can keep one dimension and one dimension packed with the 2 dimension, or else you can keep one empty space and 3. Automatically compiler gets calculated and assigned to it. So, and you can keep like this also, all 6 elements in the same array elements. Accessing two-dimensional array elements. How you can access an element in two-dimensional array is accessed by using subscripts. Subscripts are nothing but what is the row element and column element index. So as I said, you want to access the fifth element, then you have to keep the watch the number. What is a row number? What is a column number? How to pass individual array elements to the code. Now, let's let's take, you have to consider a age array. So display age array 1 and age array 2. User will enter the 2 ages. After that, once he has done it, you will pass the second and third elements also to display one by one. How to pass arrays to the function? It's very simple. You can pass it as from the argument. So here in this example, classic example, you have used a float variable and declare a array also in a float manner. Data type is float. And that is done. You have called a function and passed this array. This is how you can pass an array to a function. Then it jumps from the compiler controller, will go from here to here, this function call. So here it will go. Then it performs these instructions and returns the sum associated after the calculation. Then it goes and assigned to this particular variable result. After that, result gets printed to the terminal. So this is how the array you have to pass. So we'll stop till here. Thanks for joining.